Miami Beach just spent $500 million to stop the ocean. The ocean didn't care. Right now, the most expensive flood system ever built in America is running at full power. Every pump, every station, every dollar working exactly as designed. And the water is still rising. Lamborghinis are submerged to their door handles on Ocean Drive. Tourists are wading knee-deep through salt water in front of hotels that charge $800 a night. And the people who live here, the ones who were promised this would never happen again, are watching their ground floors fill up for the third time this year. But here is what the city isn't telling you. The pumps were never going to work. Not because of bad engineering, because of something underneath Miami Beach, something no pump can touch, no wall can stop, and no amount of money can fix. The same ancient limestone that is collapsing beneath Florida's coastline right now runs directly under every street, every building, and every foundation in this city. And the ocean isn't just rising over Miami Beach, it's rising through it. So here's the question nobody in City Hall wants to answer. Did Miami Beach just spend $500 million to save a city, or to delay losing one? October 17th, 6:23 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The tidal gauge at Government Cut registers a reading that makes the overnight monitoring technician look twice. The water is already 2.1 feet above the projected king tide level, and the sun hasn't risen yet. Pump stations across all 80 installation points activate simultaneously. The system designed to save Miami Beach roars to life, and the water keeps coming. By 7:15 a.m., the first streets go under. Alton Road disappears beneath a sheet of salt water moving faster than the drainage channels can absorb it. Collins Avenue follows within 20 minutes, then Lincoln Road, then the blocks surrounding the hotels and restaurants and luxury condominiums that make Miami Beach one of the most valuable pieces of real estate on the planet. The pumps are running, the water is winning. Miami Beach Public Works Director coordinates emergency response with Miami-Dade County officials as reports flood in faster than teams can log them. The National Weather Service issues coastal flood warnings across 15 neighborhoods simultaneously. This is not a hurricane. There is no storm offshore. The sky above Miami Beach is completely clear. This is just the ocean, doing what the ocean does, on a Tuesday morning in October. The numbers coming in are staggering. Flood depths reach 26 inches on Meridian Street, 43 road segments close to vehicle traffic within the first 2 hours. 1,200 ground floor businesses activate emergency protocols. Parking garages in South Beach report saltwater intrusion reaching the second level. Vehicle damage reports overwhelm the city's emergency lines before 9 a.m. On Ocean Drive, hotel concierges stack sandbags against lobby doors while guests film the scene from second-floor balconies. Valets abandon cars mid-shift, leaving luxury vehicles sitting in water that rises past their running boards. Restaurant owners on Espanola Way carry refrigerators and kitchen equipment up narrow stairwells, racing the waterline climbing their walls. A family running a souvenir shop on Washington Avenue has done this before. They know exactly which items to grab first. At 9:47 a.m., a city spokesperson steps in front of cameras outside the Emergency Operations Center. The pump system is operating at maximum designed capacity, she says carefully. All stations are fully functional. The flooding is consistent with an extreme king tide event exceeding design parameters. Read that last part again. Exceeding design parameters. In plain language, that means the ocean has already grown bigger than the system built to hold it back. The $500 million investment is not failing. It is working perfectly. And it is not enough. For the people watching saltwater swallow their streets on a clear October morning, the difference doesn't matter at all. The pumps were supposed to change everything. Back in 2015, Miami Beach was a global punchline. News cameras captured tourists swimming through intersections. Luxury cars drowned on sunny afternoons. The images went viral, and city officials faced an uncomfortable truth in front of the entire world. So they made a promise. They would build something so advanced, so comprehensive, so thoroughly engineered that no king tide, no matter how severe, would ever humiliate this city again. What followed was the most ambitious urban flood mitigation project in American history. 80 stormwater pump stations installed across the city. Seawalls raised and reinforced along critical corridors. Streets in the most vulnerable neighborhoods physically elevated by several feet. Their surfaces rebuilt higher above sea level at a cost that made national headlines. City engineers called it a generational investment. Politicians called it a model for every coastal city in the world. The ribbon cuttings were celebrated. The coverage was glowing. Miami Beach, they said, had cracked the code. The system was designed to handle a specific set of conditions. Tidal levels up to 2.3 feet above mean sea level. Rainfall events up to 3 inches per hour. Storm surge scenarios based on 2015 projections for what the Atlantic would look like through 2030. Those numbers felt conservative and responsible at the time. Engineers built in safety margins. The math worked on paper, and city officials stood behind it with complete confidence. But there was a flaw built into the foundation of the entire project, and it had nothing to do with the pumps themselves. Dr. Harold Wanless, coastal geologist at the University of Miami, reviewed the design specifications after construction was already underway. The system was engineered against sea level projections that climate scientists had already begun revising upward at the time of construction. Miami Beach was solving a 2015 problem, while accelerating reality was delivering a 2035 problem. The numbers make the gap impossible to ignore. When the pump program launched, Miami Beach measured sea level rise at roughly 1 inch every 3 years. Current NOAA monitoring stations record the rate accelerating to nearly double that figure, and the curve is not flattening. Each year that passes, the distance between what the pumps can handle and what the ocean delivers grows measurably wider. The engineering did not fail. The assumptions underneath it did. City officials spent $500 million on an answer. The ocean spent those same years changing the question. And on the morning of October 17th, with every pump station running at full capacity and saltwater still swallowing the streets, the gap between what was promised and what is actually happening became impossible for anyone to explain away. The problem was never just the water coming over Miami Beach. The problem is the water coming through it. Miami Beach sits on top of the Biscayne Aquifer, a massive layer of porous limestone that stretches beneath the entire region. Limestone is not solid ground the way most people picture solid ground. It is riddled with holes, cracks, and interconnected channels carved out over millions of years by moving water. When the ocean rises around a city built on rock like this, the water does not politely wait at the seawall. It seeps sideways through the stone itself, pushing up through the ground from below, emerging through streets and parking lots, and building foundations that sit nowhere near the coastline. Engineers have a name for it. They call it sunny day flooding. It happens without rain, without storms, without any warning at all. And no pump system on Earth can stop it, because the water is not coming from above. It is coming from beneath. NOAA monitoring data shows Miami Beach is experiencing sea level rise among the fastest recorded rates on the entire Atlantic coast. Current measurements track the ocean climbing at 4.1 millimeters per year. A figure that sounds small until you understand it represents a 40% acceleration compared to 20th century averages. The rate is not holding steady. Scientists at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science document the acceleration curve bending sharply upward, driven by thermal expansion of warming ocean water combined with ice sheet contributions that are outpacing every major climate model from the previous decade. Land subsidence compounds the crisis in ways that rarely make the official flood mitigation reports. Miami Beach is sinking at a measurable rate of 1 to 2 millimeters per year as the ground beneath it slowly compresses and shifts. When you add land moving down to ocean moving up, the effective rate of relative sea level rise becomes significantly worse than either number alone suggests. The city is not simply being approached by the water, it is descending toward it. Dr. Szymon Wodowinski at Florida International University analyzed subsidence data across Miami Beach with results that alarmed the engineering community. The limestone foundation shows fracture activity, increasing groundwater pressure changes, and accelerating subsidence in several coastal neighborhoods. The same geological signatures scientists detected beneath Florida's collapsing coastline before the sinkholes opened. At current acceleration rates, NOAA projections place Miami Beach's pump system below functional effectiveness. Thresholds by 2035. Not obsolete, not strained. Physically incapable of managing baseline tidal conditions on a clear afternoon. The ocean is not threatening Miami Beach somewhere in the distant future. The timeline has already moved inside the decade. Carmen Reyes has lived on Sunset Drive for 22 years. She raised 3 children in that house, survived 4 hurricanes, and watched the neighborhood change around her in ways she never expected. What she did not expect was standing in her living room on a Tuesday morning in October, in 3 inches of salt water, watching her baseboards dissolve for the 3rd time since January. Her flood insurance claim was denied. The policy she has paid into for 19 years contains a ground seepage exclusion buried in paragraph 11 of the fine print. The water came from below. The policy does not cover below. Carmen is not alone. Across Miami Beach's most chronically flooded neighborhoods, homeowners are discovering the same brutal gap between what they thought their coverage meant and what it actually says. The flooding that is now happening routinely in Sunset Harbor, south of 5th, and North Beach does not arrive the way insurance policies imagined flooding would arrive. It seeps. It rises through foundations. It appears in rooms with no windows facing the water. Adjusters photograph the water lines and check the exclusion boxes, and families are left with damage that can reach 6 figures and 0 financial recourse. Manuel Torres opened his restaurant on Ocean Drive in 2019, 4 years after the city promised the pump system would end the flooding that had killed 2 previous businesses on that same block. He spent $340,000 on renovations. He built a customer base strong enough to survive the pandemic. On the morning of October 17th, salt water entered his kitchen at 7:45 a.m. and did not stop rising for 4 hours. His equipment losses alone exceed $80,000. His business interruption insurance has a hurricane-only trigger clause. A king tide does not qualify. The psychological toll runs alongside the financial one and is just as devastating. Pediatric anxiety referrals in Miami-Dade coastal zip codes have climbed 280% over the past 3 years, according to county health department data. Children who have watched their homes flood repeatedly develop a specific and persistent fear that the adults around them struggle to address honestly, because the honest answer is that the flooding is going to keep happening. Meanwhile, the tourists keep arriving. They photograph the water lines on the Art Deco hotels and post them before the streets have even dried. For them, it is content. For Carmen and Manuel and the thousands of residents who built their lives on this particular piece of ground, it is the slow erasure of everything they worked for. The cruelest part is not the water itself. It is the growing certainty that the city they were promised would be protected has quietly accepted that it cannot keep that promise. The total assessed property value sitting inside Miami Beach's most flood-vulnerable zones exceeds $40 billion. That number needs a moment to land. The entire $500 million pump program, the one that just failed on a clear October morning, represents roughly 1 cent of protection for every dollar of property it was supposed to defend. The real estate market is not waiting for scientists to finalize their projections. It is already responding. property sales in the three most chronically flooded Miami Beach neighborhoods dropped 34% in the 18 months following the 2023 king tide season. Average days on market tripled. Price reductions on flood zone listings now average 22% below initial asking, and that gap widens every time another October morning makes the national news. Buyers have Google. They can see the footage. The market is pricing in what the city's official statements refuse to say directly. The mortgage crisis forming underneath the property market is quieter, but potentially more catastrophic. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have begun tightening underwriting requirements for coastal Florida properties, flagging flood zone locations for additional scrutiny that slows closings and pushes some buyers out entirely. Private mortgage lenders are quietly declining applications for properties within documented recurring flood zones without publicly announcing a policy change. When financing disappears from a real estate market, values do not decline gradually. They collapse. Insurance is already in free fall. Citizens Property Insurance, Florida's state-backed insurer of last resort, faces insolvency projections that actuaries describe as a matter of timing rather than possibility. 17 private carriers have exited the Florida coastal market entirely since 2021. Homeowners who remain insured are paying premiums that have tripled in 4 years for coverage that excludes the exact type of damage now occurring most frequently. Lloyd's of London quietly reclassified the Atlantic limestone coast as extreme risk in internal assessments circulated to reinsurance partners. The practical translation is straightforward. The financial architecture that makes coastal property ownership possible, mortgages, insurance, resale value, is being withdrawn from Miami Beach faster than the floodwater on any given October morning. The ocean is winning the financial battle before it finishes winning the physical one. Miami Beach City Commissioners held an emergency session 2 days after the October 17th flooding. The meeting was supposed to project confidence. It did not. Commissioner after commissioner asked variations of the same question, and the city's engineering consultants gave variations of the same answer. The system performed within designed parameters. The event exceeded those parameters. The room understood what that meant. Even if nobody said it plainly, the $500 million did not work, and nobody has a clean explanation for what comes next. Internal city documents reviewed by engineering oversight committees tell a story that is more uncomfortable than the public statements. Projections submitted during the pump program's design phase included a notation that system capacity would require reassessment by 2028 based on accelerating sea level data available at the time of construction. That notation did not make the press releases. It did not appear in the ribbon-cutting speeches. It sat in the technical appendix while politicians celebrated a solution they were already being told had an expiration date. The conflict between state and city governments adds another layer of paralysis. Florida's state legislature spent years legally prohibiting certain agencies from using the phrase climate change in official documents. Miami Beach's entire flood crisis is a climate change story. That political contradiction has not resolved. It has simply become more expensive with each passing king tide season. In Washington, the same partisan battle playing out over California's flood relief and Florida's sinkhole emergency now extends to Miami Beach. Senate Democrats push for expanded coastal resilience funding that would dwarf the original pump investment. House Republicans question whether federal taxpayers should subsidize development decisions made on land that scientists flagged as vulnerable decades ago. FEMA, simultaneously managing disaster responses across multiple states, is operating on reserves that administrators openly describe as unsustainable. The most honest voices are the quietest ones. A growing number of coastal engineers and urban planners are using the phrase managed retreat in private conversations about Miami Beach. It means accepting that some land cannot be defended indefinitely and planning accordingly. Publicly, it remains a radioactive idea. Privately, it is becoming the only conversation that makes mathematical sense. Miami Beach is not a local story. It stopped being a local story the moment the pump system failed on a clear morning with no storm in sight. What is happening on this narrow barrier island is being studied by coastal engineers in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Venice, and Jakarta as a real-time test case for every urban flood mitigation strategy currently in use or under construction anywhere on the planet. The conclusion those engineers are drawing is not encouraging. Charleston, South Carolina is already recording recurrent sunny day flooding that mirrors Miami Beach's patterns from a decade ago. Norfolk, Virginia, home to the largest naval base in the world, is sinking at twice Miami Beach's subsidence rate, while the Navy spends billions on infrastructure built on ground that geologists describe with the same language they use for Florida's collapsing coastline. The United States military has formally classified sea level rise as a national security threat. The base that supports Atlantic Fleet operations is losing the geological argument. 3 nuclear facilities operating in Florida's flood vulnerability corridor have emergency response plans that assume stable ground conditions. Those assumptions are being revised. The Port of Savannah, the 3rd busiest in America, sits on limestone formations that USGS monitoring teams now include in their expanded geological assessment network. NOAA's most current acceleration models project that Miami Beach will experience as a routine baseline condition by 2035, what scientists in 2015 classified as a 100-year flood event. That is not a worst-case projection. That is the middle estimate. The worst case arrives sooner. 1 week after October 17th, the streets of Miami Beach are dry again. The pump stations are cycling down from emergency output. City officials are issuing statements about system performance and resilience planning. Tourists are back on Ocean Drive. But the limestone beneath the streets keeps dissolving. The ocean keeps rising. The land keeps sinking. And every city watching Miami Beach from a distance is watching its own future arrive, just slightly behind schedule. The water lines are still visible on the pastel facades of the Art Deco hotels on Ocean Drive. Pale rings of salt and sediment marking exactly how high the ocean climbed on a clear Tuesday morning before the pumps pushed it back. Workers pressure wash the walls every time it happens. The stains keep returning. That detail, more than any data point or damage estimate, captures what is actually happening to Miami Beach. The city will tell you the system worked. Technically, that is true. Every pump ran, every station activated, every dollar of engineering performed the function it was designed to perform. What the city will not tell you, at least not in a press release, is that the ocean has already outgrown the system built to contain it, and the gap between what the pumps can handle and what the tides now deliver increases every single year without exception. The limestone beneath Miami Beach dissolves at a rate that does not respond to budget cycles or election schedules. The ocean rises according to physics, not policy. The land sinks whether or not the city commission votes to acknowledge it. These are not political positions. They are measurements, and the measurements are moving in one direction with a consistency that no infrastructure program has yet interrupted. The people who live here deserve honesty. Carmen Reyes, standing in salt water in her living room, deserves honesty. Manuel Torres, salvaging his restaurant equipment at 7:45 in the morning, deserves honesty. The families who bought into the promise that $500 million had solved this problem deserve to know what the technical appendices said while the ribbon cuttings were being photographed. Miami Beach spent $500 million and bought itself something. The engineers can tell you exactly what it bought, measured in years, before baseline tidal conditions exceed system capacity on a permanent basis. That number is not as large as the city would like it to be. The ocean is not threatening Miami Beach somewhere in the future. It is arriving on schedule, through the ground, on clear mornings, while the pumps run at full power and the tourists take photographs and the water lines dry into the walls like a question nobody wants to answer out loud.